Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. And this is the first episode of 2025. I often get the year wrong. I regularly say I'm in 2023 when it's 2024, but it is actually the beginning of 2025. You might not be listening to it then, but this is the first episode of a new year. And I want to talk about something that is a bit bizarre to talk about at the beginning of a year, but I think it's really important that we look at it differently. I want to talk today about regret. And I wonder whether you've ever thought about doing a regret audit. Have you looked back at the year previous and thought about the stuff that happened that you regret? Regret is a bit of an emotion or a topic that we don't really like to talk about. And actually, I think we live in a culture where the idea of having no regrets is really important. You know, people literally sing about it. They live by this mantra of I'll have no regrets. And I want us to look at it a little bit differently today and actually push into the idea of regret. I don't like it. I don't really enjoy thinking about things that I regret, because I think when we think about regrets, we're automatically drawn to this idea of we can't do anything about that. We made a mistake. It's a failure. And we spiral into this. My life is therefore not as good as it could have been had I not done that thing. But I think by avoiding the emotion of regret and avoiding the topic, we just miss out on how we can grow as people. So have you thought about doing a regret audit, even of just the last year? There might be some bigger regrets, like I regret not working harder on a project, or I regret not putting more time into my master's, or a smaller regret like I regret the fact I had that piece of cake that I shouldn't have eaten that day, or whatever it might be. But there are plenty of things that have happened over the last year that I definitely regret. I regret going to bed too late too often and being tired. I regret not prioritizing my own health enough, which is a bit of an ongoing frustration for me. I regret some of the conversations I've had, some of the words I've spoken that are hurtful. I regret some of the things I haven't said that I could have said. And so if I sit and sort of reflect on the last year, there are definitely things that I regret. And I'd love us to talk about the topic of regret together today and how we can use it positively as we look ahead to this year and use it to help us make decisions for the new year that are led into an idea of actually, I don't want to regret this at the end of this year. So how might it look differently? So let's talk a little bit about what regret is. It is an emotion that we feel, and it is potentially a negative emotion in the sense that we feel worse about something rather than better when we feel a sense of regret. And it's triggered when we think about something in our past that didn't happen the way we would have liked it to have done, either because of something that we do or because of something we didn't do. So regret is a time-traveling emotion where we look back over something, and it's complicated because we're imagining ourselves in a previous season and we're thinking about, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I hadn't done this. And an emotion that comes up in us because of something that we didn't do or we should have done differently is regret. That is what regret is. And interestingly, there are all kinds of things that we can regret. So we can regret things that are those small deals like, oh, I wish I hadn't gone there on holiday. I didn't like that hotel. Or we can regret much bigger things like, I wish I hadn't got married to that person. So there's a whole wide range of those things that we can regret. And I want us to think about today the different kinds of regrets that we can have. So we're going to look at regret together today, looking at the work of Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink is an author and researcher and brilliant at what he does. And he wrote a book called The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Can Move Us Forward. And we're going to use some of his findings to help us reflect today, think about our upcoming year and how it might look different, and actually use any previous regret to avoid any future regret that we might have. So I've explained what regret is and how it can be important to us. And Daniel Pink found from the work that he did that it is a universal emotion. And we regret similar things the world over. He actually did something called the World Regret Survey. He looked at 23,000 regrets from around the globe. and recognise that there were some very clear patterns of the things that we regret. He also found it so interesting how actually desperately people wanted to offload their regret to this online website where they could talk about it. And about a third of people were really happy to chat about it. And it showed actually that there was some unfinished business really around the world of regret in their lives, and that they needed some kind of opportunity to discuss, to disclose, and to talk about the regrets that they had. And he really argues in the book to not see it as a negative thing, but as a fuel for the rest of our life. Actually, often we can do something about regrets that we have, and we can make a difference going forward, and that we can actually, rather than pushing regret to one side, think about regret a little bit differently. Regret is not the same as having a simple disappointment or frustration. It is something more deep, where we realise we could have made a different decision, we could have made a different choice, and therefore have a better outcome. So it's not just a little bit of a sense of, oh, that was a bit disappointing or frustrating. It's more of a realisation, I should have said something different. I should have done something different. I could have acted differently. And if I had have done, the outcome would have been better. Something that I know I regret is that I regret doing Maths A-level. I mean, it all worked out in the long run, but actually I really should have done English A-level. That's a really simple decision that I made for all the wrong reasons. And if I could time travel back, I would do that differently. Now, of course, the trajectory of my life was worked out fine, but that is a definite decision that I should have made differently. So let's talk about the 4 different categories of regret. Daniel Pink found that as he was talking to people, there would be things people would say that sound very similar. And you might say, oh, those are all romance regrets. Like, oh, I shouldn't have married that person, or I should have held on to that person. I shouldn't have let that childhood sweetheart get away. But actually, there is something underneath that whole collection of regrets that leads us towards a more core category, something that combines certain types of regrets together. So there are 4 types of regrets. I'm going to explain what those are briefly, and then we'll look at them in more detail. So the 4 main types of regret are foundation regrets. These are regrets about not building a stable base for our future. Things like I should have saved more, or I should have worked harder on my health, or I should have worked harder at school. Those are foundation regrets. Then we've got boldness regrets. These are regrets about missing opportunities due to fear or hesitation, not pursuing a dream that we could have pursued, or speaking up in a critical moment. I should have said what I felt. I should have moved location. I should have left my job. I should have started that business. It's about not taking the chance. Then we've got moral regrets. Moral regrets are when we do something that goes against our values, when we know we have behaved in a way that cuts across our core values: cheating, lying, betraying, bullying. Behaviours that we know we should not have exhibited in our life, and those are moral regrets. And then finally, we've got connection regrets. Connection regrets are about neglected or damaged relationships. Not pursuing the friendship that we had, letting people drift apart, not pursuing connection with our children, with our parents, with friends from different areas of our life, and letting people move on and leave our life. And so these 4 areas of regrets are the core categories that when we say this is the thing that we did or didn't do, they will fall into one of these areas. So let's just take a moment to talk about those in a bit more detail. So the foundation regrets. I wonder whether you have any foundation regrets. These are ones that we're going to have as we get a bit older. So you're probably not going to have as many foundation regrets when you're in your 20s, because you're still building that foundation. But once you hit your 30s and your 40s and you look back at things, you might think there are some things that I didn't do in that season of my life that would have built a different foundation for me. Loads of people talk about not taking opportunity at school. That's a massive foundation regret. If I'd just worked a bit harder. I remember actually a friend of ours saying to my boys when they were a bit younger than they are now, don't miss the opportunity of school. I really messed about, and I can't go back and do anything different about that now. I mean, he can, and he can pursue adult education, but he can't redo his school years. I wonder whether you think about the health choices in your life and think, I wish I'd done more there to look after myself. I think that's probably a foundation regret that I have. I had my children when I was really quite young and really didn't know a lot about health, if I'm honest. I I understood healthy lifestyle, and we've had a dog all our life, so we've always walked the dog in the park and so on and so forth. But my understanding of health has really ramped up in the last few years. And I look back at those foundation years and think I could have done more to look after my health in that period of my life than I did. I didn't prioritize it. I didn't understand food maybe the way I do now. And I didn't look after the body of my 20s in order to prepare it as well as I could for my body in my 40s. And that's probably a foundation regret that I carry for sure. And I wonder, when you're listening to this, whether there's anything that you look back on and think, I'd fundamentally do that differently if I could. And that's what a foundation regret is. Then we've got those boldness regrets that I mentioned, which are much more about missed opportunities. And I wonder whether you can think of those. Times when you think, I took a safer option, and I wonder what might have happened had I been a little bit braver. What's so interesting about the boldness regrets is that those are often about inaction. So there are two types of regrets. Obviously, there are things that we did that we wish we hadn't done, like, oh, I wish I hadn't lost my temper. And there are things that we don't do, like, I wish I'd taken that opportunity to live abroad, for example. And what's interesting is when we're in our 20s, the action and inaction regrets are about 50-50. But as we get past that stage of our life, we move into the inaction regrets, way outperforming the action regrets. So apart from perhaps moments of moral regret, there's so many regrets that we have that are about things that we chose not to do, where we weren't so bold. People saying things like, I wish I'd had another child, or I wish I'd said yes to that opportunity in Paris. I wish I'd pursued my dream to start my own business. I wish I'd retrained. I wish I'd spoken up. I wish I'd told that person I loved them. I wish I'd not let that person get away. So it could be about love. It could be about education. I wish I'd taken that chance to study in another place. Interestingly, so many people have a regret about not studying in another location. I find that one really interesting. It's funny because actually I've been talking to my second son about his degree choices, and I've kind of pushed him to think about year abroad. I didn't do a year abroad, and I wonder whether there's a bit of me that's like vicariously pushing that on him because it's something that I didn't do. Now, for me, it wouldn't have worked brilliantly. I'd met my husband, and actually a year apart probably wasn't what I wanted. But I'm looking at him and thinking, gosh, don't regret that opportunity to live and grow in another space. And I wonder whether when you're listening, you're thinking, I didn't pursue a dream. I didn't speak up. I missed an opportunity. And it's often fear or hesitation, fear of failure that sits underneath these boldness regrets. Don't worry, this sounds a bit negative at the moment, but we're going to flip this on its head because we've got years ahead of us that we can shift our perspective and actually learn from this stuff rather than just going, yeah, I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and I didn't look after my health, I didn't look after my body, I didn't work hard enough, and I didn't say yes to the exciting stuff. However old you are, there is a life ahead of you for at least some years where we can shift this. Now, the moral regrets are those deeper core regrets around a behaviour that we made a decision that we knew didn't feel right. And it's so interesting. Apparently, the number one moral regret is around bullying. And that probably goes back to people's behaviour as children, I imagine, where they know they got involved in something that they shouldn't have done, or they didn't speak up and take care of somebody who was being bullied in front of them. That's a massive moral regret. Then we've got the bigger moral regrets from adult life, where we know we lied to get something, or we cheated, or we betrayed someone. And those moral regrets, even if we've moved way on from those, there'll be something about that does sit with us where we think, I could have made a different decision. And I wonder whether, as you're listening to me, there's something that comes to mind where you think, I could have behaved differently there. I think probably for me, around moral regrets, I didn't treat somebody very well that I was dating when I was in my sort of late teens. I look back and I think, my behaviour towards them was really poor. It was really selfish. It was really manipulative. And if I could go back and behave differently towards them, I definitely would. And I regret the way I was behaving at that time in my life. It's definitely not my proudest, finest moment. And then we've got connection regrets. These are about the people and relationships, letting relationships get increasingly damaged or strained, or just neglecting or feeling that sense of drift. I think it's important to reflect on friendship, and I think we should probably do a pod on friendship just separately. There are friends who are in our life for a season, and we can't hold and gather everybody all our life. If we do, and every friendship lasts for the whole of our life, we are going to be overwhelmed at that point. And there is a recognition that we need to make that not all friends are going to last forever. But there are some connection regrets that we have where we know that we've let distance come in. They could be distance in our absolute core relationships. I've been watching a show on Apple TV where there's Harrison Ford plays this character who's an older psychiatrist, and his relationship with his daughter has had quite a lot of distance in it. He didn't live with her. Him and his wife had separated, and he lived in a different location. And you see him working through this feeling of regret that now she's an adult. But actually what's really positive is he's trying to do something about it. So he's having a regret of what it could have been. And of course, you can't go back and undo that. But he's thinking about future and thinking, I actually want to do things differently. And he's trying to build that relationship the best he can with the time he has left. Again, I've got some friends that I know I've let drift that I'm sad about. Circumstances, life, location, busyness, becoming a parent have all clouded and crowded in that space. And if I could go back, there's some things I'd do differently. A couple of pen pals that, again, I wish I'd kept that going with, and friends from different seasons. So I think the connection regrets are, again, things that happen over time when we look back and think, how did we get here? The good news is if that person is still alive, there is something that we can do. And again, let's not have another inaction regret because we don't move things forward then. Now, the benefits of regret. Okay, so this sounds a bit miserable. I'm talking to you about something here that feels like, oh, gosh, why do I want to look back over 2024 or indeed my adult life and think about all the things I regret? Well, the reason that's important is because we can reframe regret as a tool for our learning and growth. We've got to deal with the uncomfortable emotions of it being something that doesn't feel great and we'd like to do different, but actually it can sharpen our decision making going forward. We can actually strengthen relationships because we rebuild those things where we feel that connection has got lost, and we can deepen our understanding of ourselves and our values. So I think rather than going, oh, no regrets, I'm going to push this aside, I think we can use it and help us to feed forward into our life going forward. There's a couple of things we can do when we're processing actual regret we've got. So if you've got a current regret, so let's think about the fact that I've said I regret some of my health decisions. What can I do about that? So I can self-disclose. So a really important step is to talk about it. Actually, whether that's with yourself and you write it down somewhere, or you talk about this with a friend and you say, oh, there's a couple of things that are really on my mind that I regret. Actually, when we talk about things, it's literally proven that we share emotional burden. Saying things out loud really does reduce their power and enables us to reframe it and begin to see things differently. Another thing we can do is to show some self-compassion. There's no point in us continually berating ourselves for something we'd wish we'd done differently. We can't undo it. There might be some action we can take. There may be some things that we can do to do some repair or some reconnection. But there's no point in berating. And we can think about our future action and think, how do I avoid this happening again? What is the potential trend or trait here that I need to look at and think about differently? If you've got a regret that was about an action that you took, it might be a good idea to think about it in terms of, well, what happened because of it? So if we go back to I took maths A level and I wished I hadn't, we could say, well, at least it pushed me to try something that was more challenging for me and actually means that my level of maths is of a pretty high standard. So we can add an at least to it to help us to reframe it differently. And I think the inaction things, we need to take that bigger picture, talk about it, but also think, how important is this going to be to me 5 or 10 years from now? And if the answer is it's really important, well, we might want to think about moving that inaction to action in this season of our life. So what are some of the things that we can do at this point? I think we can take an audit of our regrets. I think that's the first thing we can do. And then we can set some goals for 2025 based on that learning around regrets. Did you know that 57% of regrets are around career? It's around working in the wrong job, being happy to settle for something that feels unsatisfying, wrong work-life balance, chasing the wrong things. That is something that you can really think about now and think, how do you feel about career? And is there some regret I'm feeling? And what can I do about that? We can take some time to repair and reconnect with people if that's what the regret is. There is nothing stopping you reaching out to somebody and saying, can we talk? Can we meet? We can do what's called pre-regret thinking, and I like this idea. So when we're thinking about what we're about to do, an action we're about to take, or a choice we're about to make, we can actually think about it and anticipate that regret. So if you've got a decision to make, one thing you might consider doing is thinking about your future self and anticipating regret. If I do this thing right now, what will my future self be thinking about it? Time travel the other way and look back on that decision. If you're about to send that text to somebody or have that conversation or say no to that opportunity, what will your future self think about what you're about to do? And does it feel like it aligns? And if it doesn't, then that's a really good opportunity to shift. Even on the small decision, like, is my future self going to be happy that I've skipped yoga again? You know, no, it's not, because my joints and my bones and my stretching is going to be worse than ever. Use that regret as guidance going forward and think, will I regret this in 5 or 10 years' time? And I think the other thing to really think about here is a watchword, is if you think about taking action or inaction, choose the bold option every time. It's harder, but actually you will then not live with this, I wish I tried that thing. We don't normally regret as much when something doesn't work out as if we'd never tried that thing in the first place. And in conversation with my children, as we're talking about their life choices, I'm remembering that and encouraging them to shoot their shot and to prioritize the boldness every time. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. And we need to anchor our resolutions. So if you're making New Year resolutions, anchor your resolutions in this whole process. And what am I going to regret? What would a regret audit look like at the end of 2025 if I don't make these changes? If you're thinking about major goals and decisions, think about how you're going to feel from this a year from now, regret taking or not taking it, and how do these decisions fit with my long-term values? Now, this is something that's really relevant at the beginning of a year. It's relevant all the time, you know, considering how we're feeling, what we regret and what we're not regretting. And if you are feeling a sense of regret around, I'm in a life stage where I know my career feels off, or I'm regretting having not done certain things because I don't feel like I'm particularly living in line with my purpose, I want some boldness to approach that, I would love to help you, and now is a great time to do that. We're right at the beginning of January, and in a couple of weeks' time, my coaching program, The Purpose Pursuit, will be back. The doors are opening. And so if you want to find out more about that, there'll be all sorts of information in the show notes, or you can head to thepurposepursuit.co to find out more. I would love to have you involved. I would love to equip you so that you are able to look back at 2025 with less regret than you did perhaps over 2024. And so get in touch, get involved. You can find out more at thepurposepursuit.co or send me a DM on Instagram or drop me an email, anything that you like. And one last little nugget to tell you. Loads of people say don't have a tattoo because if you have a tattoo, you're going to regret it when you're old. And by the way, the evidence suggests most people do not regret their tattoos when they're old. So if you want that tattoo, go get it.